Sister-in-law ordered lobster and expensive wine. I said separate checks. The reservation was for 20. Not 20-ish, not 20 plus. And definitely not 20 strangers she decided to impress on my dime. I am Simone, 34 years old, and as a forensic auditor, I know exactly when numbers do not add up. Tonight the math was simple. My brother Dante married a woman who treats my bank account like her personal piggy bank. But tonight, the bank is permanently closed. Before I tell you how I left a $19,000 bill on the table, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach a moocher a lesson they will never forget. We were seated at Le Bernardin, one of the most expensive seafood restaurants in New York City. The air smelled of truffle butter and old money. I sat at the head of the table watching my sister-in-law Tiffany wave a waiter over for the 5th time. Another bottle of Chateau Margaux, she screeched, her voice cutting through the elegant murmurs of the dining room. That bottle cost $2,000. It was the 5th one. I looked at my watch. It had only been 90 minutes. Tiffany was glowing not from pregnancy, but from the thrill of spending money she did not earn. She had turned a simple family dinner into a gala for 15 of her closest sorority sisters, women I had never met in my life. They were currently devouring towers of shellfish and laughing about their summer plans in the Hamptons. My mother, Mama Louise, sat quietly next to me, picking at her bread roll, looking terrified. She knew what was coming. I had warned Dante. I told him this was a family dinner, not a charity ball. He just looked down at his plate, unable to meet my eyes, his face buried in his hands. Tiffany was in her element. She tapped her glass with a fork, demanding attention. "Everyone listen up," she announced, beaming. "I just want to thank my wonderful sister-in-law Simone for treating us all tonight. She is a big-shot auditor, so this is just pocket change for her, right, Simone?" Her friends cheered, raising their glasses. I felt my blood run cold. I had never agreed to this. I had agreed to take my mother and brother out to celebrate the news of the baby, not to fund a banquet for Tiffany and her entourage. Finally, the waiter approached with the leather folder. He hesitated before placing it near the center of the table. The room seemed to go silent. Tiffany did not even blink. She reached out with a manicured hand, grabbed the folder, and slid it aggressively across the white tablecloth until it hit my wine glass with a sharp clink. The total stared up at me. $18,500. Tiffany giggled, waving a lobster claw in the air. "You get that right, Simone. My hands are covered in butter. Besides, this is your treat for the baby. Consider it an early shower gift." The table went dead silent. Her friends stopped chewing. Dante shifted in his seat. They all looked at me, expecting the dutiful, rich sister to pull out her black card. I looked at Tiffany. I looked at the bill. Then I looked at the waiter. I smiled, but it was not a nice smile. I picked up the folder and handed it back to him without opening it. "Separate checks, please. I am only paying for myself and my mother. The rest belongs to the lady with the butter on her hands." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Tiffany dropped her lobster claw. It hit the porcelain plate with a wet thud. Her face shifted from glowing pride to ugly panic in a nanosecond. She stood up so abruptly, her chair screeched against the floor, drawing the attention of the entire restaurant. Gone was the sweet sister-in-law who just wanted to celebrate. In her place stood a cornered animal baring its teeth. "You cannot be serious, Simone," she hissed, her voice rising an octave. "You are going to humiliate me in front of my friends over a few dollars. You make 6 figures. This is nothing to you. Why are you being so petty? Is it because I have a husband and a baby on the way and you are 34 and alone? Is that it? You are jealous of my happiness, so you want to ruin my night." Her friends exchanged awkward glances. Some reached for their purses, only to remember they probably could not afford a $2,000 split either. My mother. Mama Louise looked down at her lap, her hands trembling. She hated confrontation, and Tiffany knew it. Tiffany turned to her, capitalizing on her fear. "Mom, tell her. Tell her she is being cruel. Stress is bad for the baby. Do you want something to happen to your grandchild because Simone is cheap?" That was the trigger. Dante, who had been shrinking into his suit, suddenly found his voice. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight and desperate. Simone, please don't do this. Not here, not now. Look at her, she's crying. Just pay the bill. I will pay you back, I swear. I just need a week. We can work this out later. Just do not make a scene. I looked at my brother. I looked at the sweat beading on his forehead. He was wearing a Rolex I knew he could not afford, and a suit I probably paid for 3 Christmases ago. I pulled my arm away from his grasp. You will pay me back, Dante. Just like you paid me back for your tuition. Just like you paid me back for the down payment on your car. I am done being the bank that never closes. If you want to play big shot and treat 20 people to vintage wine, you better have the funds to back it up. The commotion had gone on long enough. The floor manager, a tall man with an icy demeanor, materialized at our table. He looked at the uneaten seafood towers and the empty wine bottles, then at Tiffany, who was now fake sobbing into a cloth napkin. Is there a problem here? He asked, his voice low but threatening. There is no problem, Tiffany sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at me. She is paying. She is just having a mental breakdown. She is trying to ruin my baby shower. The manager turned to me, raising an eyebrow. Madam, the bill must be settled. The total is $18,500. If payment is not rendered immediately, I will be forced to contact the authorities. Theft of services is a felony in New York, especially at this amount. I did not blink. I pulled out my black Amex card. The manager looked relieved until I spoke. Put the grilled chicken and the garden salad on this. And my mother's soup. That comes to about $80. As for the rest, I suggest you ask the gentleman with the fake Rolex or the lady screaming about her baby. I am not liable for orders I did not make. You can check your security cameras. I ordered water. They ordered the ocean. Call the police. I will wait. 2 uniformed officers walked through the heavy glass doors of Le Bernardin, and the entire restaurant fell into a hushed silence. Tiffany launched into her performance immediately. She clutched her stomach with one hand and grabbed the arm of the nearest officer with the other, hyperventilating as if she were in active labor. "Officer, thank God you are here!" she wailed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "My sister-in-law is mentally unstable. She invited us all here for my baby shower and now she is refusing to pay. She is trying to get me arrested. I am pregnant, officer. The stress is killing me. Please, you have to make her pay," she promised. The young officer looked at me. He saw a calm woman sitting with a glass of water, while a hysterical pregnant woman pointed an accusing finger. "Ma'am, is this true?" he asked, his hand resting on his belt. "Did you agree to pay for this party?" I did not raise my voice. I did not get angry. In my line of work, emotions are irrelevant. Only evidence matters. "Officer. I am a forensic auditor," I said, keeping my hands visible on the table. "I specialize in fraud detection. Because of the sensitive nature of my family dynamic, I record all interactions that involve financial discussions." I tapped my phone screen. "I would like you to listen to this audio from 2 hours ago." Tiffany froze mid-sob. Her eyes darted to my phone. I pressed play. The audio was crystal clear. My voice rang out. "Dante, bring Mom. Just us 3. I want a quiet dinner." Then Tiffany's voice screeching and high-pitched. "Surprise, I invited the girls. We are going to turn up." Then my voice again, stern and direct. "I did not agree to this, Tiffany. I am not paying for 15 people." Then Tiffany again dismissing me. "Oh, stop being a buzzkill, Simone, you can afford it." I stopped the recording. The officer looked at Tiffany, whose face had drained of all color. "Ma'am, it seems you ordered services knowing the host had explicitly refused to pay. That is theft of services. Unless you have a way to settle this bill right now, you will have to come with us." Tiffany turned to her sorority sisters, desperate. "Guys, chip in, please. Just put it on your cards and I will Venmo you later." The table of 15 women suddenly found the floor very interesting. One girl muttered that she forgot her wallet. Another claimed her card was maxed out. These were the same women who were guzzling vintage wine 10 minutes ago. Now that the bill was due, they were strangers. The manager stepped forward, holding a clipboard. "We need payment or collateral now, or I press charges." Dante stepped between the officer and his wife. He looked like a broken man. He was trembling. "I do not have the money," he whispered, his voice cracking. "But I have this." Slowly, painfully, he unclasped the gold Rolex from his wrist. It was a vintage piece, the only thing of value our father had left him. Tiffany gasped. "Dante, that is your dad's watch." Dante ignored her. He handed the heavy gold watch to the manager. "Take it," he said, tears welling in his eyes. "I will sign a promissory note for the rest. Just let us go." The manager took the watch, examining it with a sneer before nodding. I watched my brother sign away his dignity to save a woman who had just tried to frame me. As they walked out, Tiffany turned back to look at me. Her eyes were not sad. They were filled with pure, unadulterated hatred. This was not over. The Uber ride home was a blur of city lights and exhaustion. I stared out the window, watching New York pass by, but my mind was stuck in that restaurant. My phone vibrated against my thigh like an angry hornet. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. Mama Louise. She had barely spoken a word during the dinner, terrified of Tiffany, but now that she was safe in her own car, she had found her voice. I took a deep breath and answered on the speaker. "Simone, how could you?" Her voice was not just loud, it was shrill, piercing the quiet of the taxi. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, but I was too tired to care. "You humiliated us. You left your brother there without a watch. His father's watch, Simone. Do you know how much that meant to him? And poor Tiffany, she is hysterical. She is carrying your niece or nephew, and you treated her like a criminal." I rubbed my temples, feeling a migraine forming behind my eyes. "Mama, she tried to steal $18,000 from me. She invited 15 strangers to a dinner she could not afford. That is not family behavior. That is a scam. Steal." Mama scoffed the word, dripping with disappointment. "Family does not steal, Simone. Family shares. You have so much. You live in that glass tower downtown. You fly first class. You have that big fancy job looking at numbers all day for those corporations. What is $18,000 to you compared to your brother's dignity? You are blessed, Simone, and when you are blessed, you are supposed to bless others." I felt a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat. Blessed? That was a funny word for it. I worked 80 hours a week as a forensic auditor, unraveling complex financial crimes, while Dante played video games and pretended to be an entrepreneur. I was the one who paid off the mortgage on Mama's house 3 years ago, so she would not lose it. I was the one who paid for Dante's bail when he got into a bar fight. I was the one who bought the groceries and paid the heating bills every winter. I was the family safety net, the endless resource, the bank that was never allowed to close. They did not see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as a wallet with a pulse. "You think you are better than us," Mama continued, her voice dropping to a dangerous low. "Just because you went to college and wear expensive suits, you think you can judge us. You forgot where you came from. Tiffany is fragile. She needs support, not your cold-hearted judgment. You need to turn this car around, go back there, apologize to the manager, and get Dante's watch back. Right now." The audacity took my breath away. She wanted me to apologize for being robbed. She was choosing the woman who had just manipulated her son over the daughter who had kept a roof over her head. Something inside me finally snapped. It was the sound of a cord being cut. "No, Mama." I said, my voice calm and final. "I am not going back, and I am not paying. If Dante wants his watch back, he can get a job and pay for it himself. And if you think Tiffany is so fragile, you can pay for her lobster next time with your pension check. Simone, if you hang up on me, do not bother coming to Sunday dinner. You are tearing this family apart. If protecting my hard-earned money means I am tearing the family apart, then let it rip. I pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the red button ending the call. Then I did something I had never done in my entire life. I tapped the info icon next to her name. Block caller. The car went silent again. For the first time in 34 years, the bank was officially closed. The morning sun hit my face, but it did not bring warmth. It brought chaos. I woke up to a sound that every professional dreads. My phone was not just buzzing, it was vibrating so violently against the marble nightstand that it sounded like a drill. I reached for it, squinting against the light, and my heart skipped a beat. 99 plus notifications on Instagram. 99 plus on TikTok. Hundreds of text messages from numbers I did not recognize. I sat up in bed and unlocked my screen. The first thing I saw was a video thumbnail. It was Tiffany's tear-stained face. The caption was written in a jagged, angry font. POV. My rich sister-in-law left me and my unborn baby with a $20,000 bill because she hates mixed families. Underneath were the hashtags, toxic sister-in-law, racist attack, eat the rich. I pressed play. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. Tiffany had edited the video to perfection. She had cut out the part where she ordered 5 bottles of vintage wine. She had cut out the part where she invited 15 strangers. She had cut out the waiter asking for payment. All that remained was a tight close-up of my face looking cold and unyielding, saying the words, "I am not paying." Then it cut to Tiffany sobbing in the back of an Uber, holding her stomach. The background music was a sad acoustic piano track designed to break hearts. The video had 2.1 million views. It had been posted 6 hours ago. I scrolled down to the comments and felt the bile rise in my throat. They were vile. Someone named Brittany wrote, "I hope this woman loses her job." "Who treats a pregnant woman like that?" another user wrote. I found her LinkedIn. Her name is Simone and she works at City Trust. Let us ruin her life. Tiffany had not just vented, she had weaponized the internet against me. She knew she could not win a logical argument, so she decided to win the emotional war. She painted herself as the poor, defenseless white girl bullied by the angry, successful black woman. It was a narrative she knew society would eat up with a spoon. Then the notification I feared most appeared at the top of my screen. It was not from a troll. It was not from a bot. It was an Outlook notification. The sender was Janice from Human Resources. The subject line was in bold red letters. Urgent meeting regarding code of conduct violation. I opened the email. Dear Simone, we have been made aware of a viral video circulating on social media that allegedly depicts you engaging in behavior that conflicts with our company values of inclusion and integrity. Please report to my office immediately upon arrival. Your access to the client server has been temporarily suspended pending an investigation. My hands shook. Not from fear, but from a cold, dark rage. Tiffany had crossed the line. She had come for my livelihood. She had come for the career I built from scratch while she was busy maxing out credit cards. I threw the covers off and walked to my closet. I did not put on sweatpants to wallow in self-pity. I put on my sharpest blazer and my highest heels. Tiffany thought this video was her victory lap. She did not realize she had just handed me the evidence I needed to bury her. She wanted a show. I would give her a war. The elevator ride up to the 42nd floor of City Trust usually felt like an ascent to my throne. I had earned my corner office with blood, sweat, and tears, often working until midnight to catch the discrepancies that others missed. But today, the elevator felt like a cage. Every time the doors opened and a colleague stepped in, the air grew thick with awkward silence. They had seen the video. They had seen the comments. To them, I was no longer Simone, the brilliant forensic auditor. I was Simone, the angry black woman who bullied a pregnant lady. When I reached my desk, my keycard did not beep. It blinked an angry red. Access denied. My stomach dropped. Before I could try again, Janice, the vice president of Human Resources, appeared at my cubicle wall. She did not smile. She did not ask how my weekend was. She simply gestured for me to follow her. Inside her office, the air was sterile and cold. Janice sat behind her mahogany desk, her hands clasped tightly together. On her screen, paused in high definition, was Tiffany's tear-streaked face. Janice cleared her throat, looking everywhere but at my eyes. Simone, we value your contributions to this firm. However, we also value our public image. This video is disturbing. The allegations of financial abuse and racial bias are serious. We have clients who are asking questions. We cannot afford this kind of publicity. I tried to speak to explain that it was an edited video, that I was the victim of theft, but Janice held up a hand to stop me. It does not matter what the truth is, Simone. Perception is reality in our business. Until this investigation is concluded, we are placing you on unpaid administrative leave. You will need to hand over your company phone and laptop. Security will escort you out. Unpaid. The word hung in the air like a guillotine. They were cutting off my livelihood based on a 30-second TikTok clip. I felt a hot wave of shame wash over me as I placed my badge on her desk. I had built this career for 10 years. I was the one who saved this company millions in potential fraud losses last quarter. And now I was being discarded like trash because my sister-in-law knew how to fake cry on camera. Walking out of the building, flanked by 2 security guards whom I used to share coffee with, was the lowest moment of my life. I walked past the reception desk with my head held high, but inside I was screaming. I hailed a cab and gave my home address, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Back in my apartment, the silence was deafening. I sat on my couch in the dark. I had no job. I had no family support. My name was being dragged through the mud by thousands of strangers. It would have been easy to record a response video, to scream and shout and defend myself. But that is what they expected. They expected the angry reaction. I would not give it to them. I walked over to my personal desktop computer. It was a high-powered machine I used for freelance consulting. I powered it up, the hum of the fan sounding like a jet engine preparing for takeoff. I cracked my knuckles. Tiffany thought she had won because she controlled the narrative with words. But she forgot who I was. I do not deal in words. I deal in data. I deal in paper trails. I opened a new spreadsheet and named it simply the audit. If they wanted a villain, I would show them what happens when you cross a woman who knows where every single penny is buried. I was not going to explain myself. I was going to expose them. The digital attacks from strangers were manageable, but when my own blood turned against me, it cut deeper. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications from the family group chat. This chat was usually reserved for Thanksgiving planning and birthday wishes, but today it was a firing squad. Auntie May was the first to shoot. She typed in all caps saying, "Simone, you are a disgrace. How could you let your brother be humiliated like that? You make us all look bad." Then Uncle Roy chimed in, calling me a traitor to my race. He said I had forgotten where I came from just because I had a corporate job and money in the bank. They did not care about the facts. They did not care that Tiffany had tried to scam me. In their eyes, I had committed the ultimate sin. I had chosen my wallet over my brother. Then came the photo that silenced everyone. Tiffany posted a picture on Instagram and forwarded it to the family chat. It was a selfie taken from a hospital bed. She was wearing a gown, looking pale and frail, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. A hospital wristband was visible on her arm. The caption read, "Doctors are worried about the baby heart rate. The stress from last night was too much. Please pray for us." My stomach churned. I looked closely at the photo. The lighting was perfect. Her hair was messy in an artful way. It was a performance. But to my family, it was proof that I was a monster. A loud banging on my front door made me jump. I did not have to guess who it was. I opened the door, and Mama Louise stormed past me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She did not hug me. She did not ask if I was okay after losing my job. She turned around and pointed a shaking finger in my face. "Did you see what you did, Simone?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "She is in the hospital. She might lose the baby." My grandbaby Simone. Because you could not just pay a bill. I tried to speak, but she cut me off. Do not say a word. You are going to fix this. You are going to get in your car right now and drive to that hospital. You are going to get down on your knees and beg Tiffany for forgiveness. And then you are going to write a check to pay off Dante's debt. I stared at her in disbelief. Mama, I just got suspended from my job because of her lies. She is manipulating you. Mama grabbed my shoulders, shaking me. I do not care about your job. I care about your brother. He is a black man in America, Simone. You know what the system does to men like him. If he gets a record for theft of services, his life is over. He will never get a good job. He will be a statistic. You have the power to save him, and you are choosing to let him drown. How can you sleep at night? Her words were a calculated weapon. She was using the very real fear we lived with every day to enable her son's incompetence. She was guilt-tripping me with systemic racism to cover up for Tiffany's greed. I looked at my mother, a woman I had supported for years, and realized she would burn me alive to keep Dante warm. I took a step back, removing her hands from my shoulders. I will not apologize, I said, my voice trembling but firm. But I will handle it. Just not the way you think. I drove to Dante's apartment in Brooklyn with a knot in my stomach. He had texted me 3 days ago begging for rent money, saying his landlord was threatening eviction. I had transferred $2,000 without asking questions because that is what big sisters do. But today I was not coming as a sister. I was coming as an auditor. I used my spare key to let myself in. The hallway smelled of stale weed and expensive perfume. Dante was not home, but the evidence of his lifestyle was everywhere. I walked into the living room and froze. For a man who claimed to be eating ramen noodles to survive, his apartment looked like a luxury boutique. Stacked against the wall were orange boxes, Hermes. Not empty boxes, but full ones. On the coffee table lay a pair of limited edition Air Jordan 1s, the kind that resell for $5,000. There were shopping bags from Saks Fifth Avenue and Neiman Marcus scattered on the floor. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had paid his rent while he was buying designer sneakers. I had paid his heating bill while they were buying silk scarves. Well, well, well. Look who decided to visit. I spun around. Tiffany was leaning against the bedroom doorframe. She was not wearing the hospital gown from her photo. She was wearing a silk robe that I recognized from a recent Gucci collection. She looked healthy. She looked radiant. And she looked smug. "Where is my brother?" I asked, my voice low. "He is out returning a rental car," Tiffany said, examining her freshly manicured nails. "You know the Porsche you paid for indirectly?" I gestured to the room. "The boxes, the bags, the shoes. You told Mama you were broke. You told me you were about to be homeless. I sent Dante $2,000 on Tuesday. Did that go to the landlord or did it go to your closet?" Tiffany laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "Oh, Simone, stop being so dramatic. We are family. What is yours is ours. Besides, what else are you going to do with all that money?" She walked closer to me, invading my personal space. She looked me up and down, her eyes filled with pity and malice. "You are 34 years old, Simone. You have no husband. You have no kids. You come home to an empty penthouse every night. Your money is just sitting there rotting. You are not going to take it to the grave." She picked up a Hermes box and caressed it. "I am actually doing you a favor. I am helping you spend it. At least this way your money brings someone joy. You should thank me. I am giving your life purpose. You get to be the provider. That is all you are good for anyway, right? Being the bank." Because let us be honest, Simone, no man wants a woman who cares more about spreadsheets than family. I looked at her, and for the first time I saw the full picture. This was not just a spoiled girl acting out. This was a calculated extraction. She had profiled me. She knew my insecurities. She knew my family's weaknesses. She had married my brother not for love, but for access to my line of credit. She was not just a gold digger. She was a parasite that had burrowed into the host and was feeding until there was nothing left. I did not scream. I did not slap her. I simply nodded slowly, absorbing the blow. You are right, Tiffany, I said quietly. I am the provider. And I think it is time I audited my investments. I turned and walked out the door, leaving her standing there with her stolen luxury. She thought she had broken me with her insults. She had no idea she had just given me the motivation to destroy her. I drove back to my penthouse in silence. The rage that had been boiling in my gut was gone, replaced by a cold, mechanical focus. Tiffany had made a fatal error. She had taunted a forensic auditor about money. She thought cash was just paper to be spent, but to me, cash is a digital footprint. It leaves a trail. It tells a story. And I was about to read every single chapter of hers. I walked into my home office and locked the door. This room was my sanctuary. On the desk sat my workstation, a custom-built rig with triple monitors and processing power that rivaled a small government agency. I did not turn on the lights. The blue glow of the screens was all the illumination I needed. I sat down and cracked my knuckles. It was time to go to work. I logged into the secure server I used for my freelance investigations. Then I pulled up the financial records for the family trust. Mama Louise had given me power of attorney years ago to manage the house payments, so I had full administrative access to everything, including the joint account she shared with Dante. I had never looked too closely before trusting that they were just buying groceries and paying bills. That trust was now dead. I ran a script to filter the transactions. I stripped away the noise, the gas station charges, the Netflix subscriptions, the grocery runs. I was looking for outliers. I was looking for the bleed. The screen filled with data. Rows and rows of numbers cascaded down like a digital waterfall. My eyes scanned them, detecting patterns that an ordinary person would miss. I saw the $2,000 transfer I sent on Tuesday. It hit the joint account at 9 in the morning. At 9:15, it was moved again. I followed the money. It did not go to a landlord. It did not go to a property management company. It went to a Zelle account linked to a generic email address. I frowned and dug deeper. I pulled the archives for the last 12 months. I searched for every time Dante had asked me for emergency cash. The car repair, the medical bill, the broken boiler. Every single time the money hit their account, it was immediately funneled out to the same destination. It was a recurring transfer labeled simply as consulting fees. I typed in a command to trace the routing number. The system churned for a few seconds before spitting out a result. The receiving account belonged to a registered LLC based in Delaware. The name of the company stared back at me in bright white letters against the black background. Blue Sky Consulting. My heart slowed down. A consulting firm. Dante barely finished community college. What kind of consulting was he paying for every month? I pulled the incorporation documents for Blue Sky Consulting. It was a shell company, no website, no physical office, just a registered agent and a P.O. box. But there was a digital signature on the formation papers. It was tiny, barely legible, but I zoomed in until the pixels sharpened. The signature did not belong to a stranger. It was a scrawl I had seen on birthday cards and wedding invitations. It was a signature that connected the dots between my brother's poverty and my sister-in-law's closet. Blue Sky Consulting was not a business. It was a funnel. And I was staring right at the operator. I did not stop at the bank records. A paper trail tells you what happened, but it does not tell you who did it. For that, I needed human intelligence. I picked up my encrypted phone and dialed a number I had not called in 2 years. Marcus was an ex-detective who got tired of the red tape and started his own private investigation firm. He was expensive, he was discreet, and he owed me a favor from a case involving a corrupt hedge fund manager. Marcus answered on the second ring. Simone. I was wondering when you would call. I saw the TikTok video. You are trending on Twitter. I ignored the pleasantries. I need a deep dive, Marcus. A full background check on Tiffany Vance and her parents. They claim to be diplomats stationed in Geneva. They say they have money in offshore trusts, but for some reason my brother is paying for their daughter's handbags through a shell company. Marcus laughed a low, gravelly sound. Diplomats. Right. And I am the Prince of Wales. Give me an hour. I sat in the dark watching the cursor blink on my screen. I thought about the stories Tiffany had told us over Sunday dinners. She claimed her parents were currently in Switzerland negotiating a trade deal. She said she went to boarding school in France. My mother ate it up. Mama Louise loved the idea that her son had married into aristocracy. She was so blinded by the fantasy that she never stopped to ask why these wealthy diplomats never visited, why they never sent a wedding gift, why they were always unreachable. The email arrived with a ping that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. The subject line was short. The apple does not fall far from the tree. I clicked the attachment. I expected to find maybe a credit score issue or a bankruptcy filing. I did not expect to see mugshots. There they were. The dignified diplomat parents Tiffany bragged about. Her father was not an ambassador named William. He was Richard Dickey Vance, a known con artist from Tampa, Florida. His record was a mile long. Grand larceny, wire fraud, selling fake timeshares to the elderly. He had served 5 years in state prison for running a Ponzi scheme disguised as a charity for veterans, and her mother, and the elegant socialite supposedly sipping champagne in the Swiss Alps. Her name was Linda, and she had 3 active warrants out for her arrest for writing bad checks across state lines and identity theft. They were not in Geneva serving the country. They were likely hiding in a trailer park in the Florida Panhandle, running from the law. I scrolled down to the bottom of the report. Marcus had added a note. Tiffany is not her birth name. She was born Tabitha Vance. She changed it legally 4 years ago, right before she met your brother. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the gray faces in the police photos. Tiffany was not just a spoiled brat. She was the second generation of a crime family. She had been trained by professionals, and she had brought her family business into my living room. I printed the mugshots. The printer hummed and I smiled. My mother wanted me to apologize. I would do better than that. I would introduce her to her real in-laws. The next morning brought a storm that had nothing to do with the weather. It started with the mail. Usually my assistant filters everything, but since I was suspended, I was collecting my own post. 3 envelopes sat on my marble counter. They were thick, they were heavy, and they were all stamped with the same terrifying words in bold red ink. Immediate action required. My hands did not shake. They went cold. I am a woman who pays her bills in full every month. I have a credit score of 820. Final notices do not exist in my world. I sliced open the first envelope from Chase. It was a statement for a Sapphire Reserve card. I did not have a Sapphire Reserve card. My eyes scanned down to the bottom line, $32,000 past due. I ripped open the second one, American Express Platinum, $28,000. The third was a Capital One Venture card maxed out at $25,000. I did the math in my head instantly. $85,000. Someone had opened 3 lines of credit in my name, maxed them out, and then stopped paying. This was not just fraud. This was identity theft of the highest order. I rushed to my computer. My suspension from the bank meant I could not access their tools, but I still had my personal subscriptions to the credit bureaus. I logged into Equifax. The screen populated and my stomach dropped. My perfect credit score had plummeted to 540. There were inquiries dating back 6 months. 6 months. This had been happening right under my nose while I was busy working 80-hour weeks to support the very people who were robbing me. I clicked on the account details. I needed to see where the statements were being sent. It was not my address. It was not my mother's house. It was a P.O. box in Queens. Box 402. I knew that zip code. It was 3 blocks from the gym where Dante claimed he worked out. I felt a bile rise in my throat. I pulled up the United States Postal Service Registry database, a tool I used frequently for skip tracing. I typed in the box number. I prayed it was a mistake. I prayed it was a stranger. The search wheel spun for what felt like an eternity. When the results loaded, the room seemed to tilt. The owner of P.O. Box 402 was listed clearly. Dante Brooks, my baby brother, the boy I had protected from bullies on the playground, the boy whose tuition I had paid. He had not just let his wife steal from me, he had given her my social security number. He had handed her the knife to stab me in the back. I stared at the pages spread across my desk. The sheer audacity of the spending was breathtaking. It was not just survival, it was gluttony. There were charges for a prenatal massage at the Mandarin Oriental, costing $600 for 90 minutes. There were receipts from a boutique in Soho for custom maternity shapewear, totaling $1,200. Tiffany was building a wardrobe for a duchess on the budget of a stolen identity. But as I turned the page, the narrative shifted. The spending moved away from baby items and into something else entirely. Men's cologne, expensive cigars, a set of titanium golf clubs shipped to an address in Jersey City. Dante did not golf. Dante was allergic to smoke. Then I found the smoking gun. Delta Airlines. A flight to Miami 3 weeks ago. Business class. 2 tickets. One for Tabitha Vance, and one for a passenger named Chad Miller. I froze. I remembered that weekend. Tiffany had told Dante she was going on a spiritual wellness retreat with her mother to prepare for the birth. Dante had spent that weekend at my place fixing a leaky faucet, talking about how much he missed her, how he wanted to be a good father. He had looked so earnest, so pathetic in his devotion. And while he was unclogging my drain, Tiffany was sipping mojitos in South Beach with Chad. I pulled up the hotel bill corresponding to the flight, the Fontainebleau, oceanfront suite, room service charges for champagne and oysters at 2 in the morning. This was not a spiritual retreat. It was a romantic getaway. And I had paid for it. My credit score had died so Tiffany could have a fling. My first instinct was to call the police immediately. I had the evidence. I had the motive. I could have the authorities at her door in 20 minutes. But then I thought about Dante. If I arrested her now, she would spin it. She would claim Chad was a cousin or a business partner. She would claim I gave her permission to use the cards and was now reneging out of spite. She would cry those tears, and Dante, desperate to believe in his happy family, might just side with her again. He would bail her out and I would be the villain once more. No, I could not just cut the head off the snake. I had to burn the nest. I needed to catch them together. I needed Dante to see it with his own eyes. I needed a stage big enough for her lies to collapse under their own weight. I looked at the invitation for the baby shower that sat on the corner of my desk. A celebration of love. It read in gold foil script. It was scheduled for next Saturday at the plaza. It was perfect. She wanted a spectacle. I would give her one. I was not going to call the cops yet. I was going to let her throw the party of the century, and then I was going to serve the indictment as the main course. I walked into the corner office of Zara King, and the air instantly felt thinner. Zara was not just a lawyer, she was a weapon in a Saint Laurent suit. We had attended Howard University together, but while I went the corporate route, Zara went for the jugular. She was the most feared financial crimes attorney in the city, and looking at the view of Manhattan from her window, I knew she was worth every penny of her $700 hourly rate. I laid the evidence on her glass desk. The credit card statements, the flight manifests, the mugshots of Tiffany's parents, and the shell company documents. Zara did not gasp. She did not look shocked. She flipped through the pages with a terrifying calmness, her face unreadable. Finally, she stopped at the photo of Tiffany and Chad in Miami. "This is not just fraud, Simone," she said, leaning back in her leather chair. "This is a racketeering enterprise. She is running a long con on your brother to get to your assets. If we go to the police now with just this, she will claim it was a domestic misunderstanding. She will say Dante gave her permission to use your info since you are family. It becomes a he said, she said, and the white pregnant lady usually wins that debate in the court of public opinion. I felt my frustration rising. So what do we do, Zara? Do I just let her spend my money? Zara smiled, and it was the smile of a predator spotting wounded prey. No. To catch a snake, you do not grab it by the tail, you feed it. You feed it until it is so full and bloated it cannot move. You let her think she has won completely. You give her exactly what she wants, which is access and validation. She tapped the invitation for the baby shower on the desk. She wants a spectacle, right? Give it to her. Agree to everything. Pay for the debts. Apologize to the family. Lure her into a false sense of security. We need her to commit a felony so large and so public that no amount of tears can wash it away. We need to catch her in the act of defrauding you in front of witnesses. It was a dangerous game, but I trusted Zara with my life. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. My hands felt heavy as I opened the family group chat, which had been silent for 2 days. Every fiber of my being screamed against what I was about to do, but I knew it was necessary. I typed the message slowly. I have been doing a lot of thinking. You are right. Family comes first. I am sorry for reacting so harshly and causing stress. I will take care of the outstanding debts. And Tiffany, let us give this baby the welcome it deserves. How does the plaza sound for the shower? I hit send. The response was immediate. Heart emojis from Mama Louise, a text from Dante saying, "Thank God, Simone, I knew you would come through," and then a message from Tiffany, just a simple smiley face emoji. She thought she had broken me. She had no idea she had just RSVP'd to her own funeral. I walked into Dante's apartment an hour later, and the smell of victory was suffocating. They were already celebrating. A bottle of Dom Perignon sat on the coffee table, next to a stack of bridal magazines. Tiffany was lounging on the sofa, looking like the cat that had not only eaten the canary, but also inherited the canary's estate. Dante jumped up to hug me, his relief palpable, but Tiffany did not move. She just took a slow sip of champagne and smirked. "I knew you would come around, Simone," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You are a smart girl. You know that fighting family is a losing battle. Besides, I forgive you. Pregnancy hormones make us all do crazy things, right?" I forced a smile that felt like cracking plaster. "Right. Hormones. So let us talk about how to make this right." Tiffany sat up straighter, her eyes gleaming with greed. She pulled out a notepad. She had a list. Of course she had a list. "First, we need to handle the financial mess," she said, tapping the paper with a pen. "Since you froze those credit cards, my credit score took a hit. And since you are admitting that this was all a misunderstanding, I expect you to pay off the balances immediately. All $85,000. Call the bank, tell them it was authorized, and clear the debt. I do not want any black marks on my record when Dante and I buy our new house." I looked at Dante. He nodded eagerly like a bobblehead. "Yeah, Simone. Just pay it off so we can start fresh. It is the least you can do after stressing her out." I clenched my hands behind my back, digging my nails into my palms to keep from laughing. They wanted me to pay for my own identity theft. They wanted me to sanitize the crime scene. "Consider it done," I said, my voice steady. "I will handle the bank first thing Monday morning." "Great," Tiffany said, flipping the page. "Now about the shower. Since you ruined my reputation online with that little stunt at the restaurant, I need a serious image rehabilitation. I do not want a backyard barbecue. I want the plaza. The grand ballroom. The plaza." It was one of the most expensive venues in New York City. And Tiffany continued, "I am inviting the press. Well, not the news, but influencers, bloggers, people who matter. I want them to see us hugging. I want them to see you handing me gifts. We need to show the world that the rumors were lies and that you support me 100%. This party needs to be so lavish that it buries that video forever." Dante looked a bit worried at the cost. "Babe, the plaza is really expensive." Tiffany shot him a glare that could cut glass. "Simone can afford it." "Can not you, Simone, unless you want to go back to being the villain." I looked at the two of them. The brother who betrayed me, and the woman who was bleeding him dry. They thought they were extorting me. They thought they were squeezing the golden goose one last time. They did not realize that by demanding the plaza and the press, they were building a stage for their own execution. A backyard barbecue would have been too small for what I had planned. I needed an audience. I looked Tiffany dead in the eye and gave her the coldest shark-like smile I could muster. The plaza sounds perfect, Tiffany. I will book the ballroom. I will hire the best caterers. And I will make sure the press is there to capture every single moment. It will be a day no one will ever forget. I promise. The atmosphere in the apartment was suffocatingly cheerful. Tiffany was in the bedroom, loudly discussing floral arrangements on the phone, leaving me alone on the sofa with Dante. He looked exhausted. The circles under his eyes were dark purple bruises against his skin. He offered me a glass of water, his hand trembling slightly. This was my chance. Dante, I said, keeping my voice casual. My phone just died and I need to show you the DJ options for the party. Can I use yours for a second? Sure, Simone. He unlocked his iPhone and handed it to me without a second of hesitation. That was the first red flag. A guilty man guards his phone like a fortress. He hides the screen. He changes the passcode. He hovers. Dante did none of those things. He leaned back and closed his eyes, rubbing his temples. I had 30 seconds before Tiffany came back. I did not go to the DJ website. I went straight to his email app. I typed Chase into the search bar. Nothing in the inbox. I checked the trash folder. There were dozens of emails from Chase confirming account changes and address updates, but none of them had been opened. They had been mass deleted. I checked the timestamps. They were deleted at times when Dante was usually at work. I switched to his text messages with Tiffany. I scrolled back 2 months. What I found made my heart stop. Dante wrote, "Babe, why was my card declined at the gas station today? I thought we had $3,000 in savings." Tiffany replied, "Oh, the bank flagged it for fraud because you went to a different station than usual. Do not worry, I transferred everything to a secure holding account to protect us. Use the cash in the jar." I scrolled further. Dante wrote, "The landlord called. He said the rent check bounced." Tiffany replied, "He is lying. He just wants to charge us a late fee. I have the receipt. Ignore him." I went to his banking app. The Face ID prompted, so I nudged Dante. "Hey, it needs your face to download the app." He blinked open his eyes and let it scan him. He did not even look at what app it was. He was completely checked out. I opened his main checking account. It was overdrawn by $400. I checked his savings. 0. Then I saw the transfers. Every single paycheck he deposited was immediately siphoned out to Blue Sky Consulting. He was not spending the money on Jordans. She was taking his money buying the Jordans for herself, and then telling him they were gifts from her rich parents. I looked at my brother. He sat there in a frayed t-shirt, worrying about how to pay for a baby that did not exist. He was not a co-conspirator. He was a mark. She had gaslighted him into believing he was bad with money so she could take total control. She had isolated him from me so he had no financial lifeline. He was not just an accomplice. He was the first victim. Tiffany walked back into the room beaming. "The florist says peonies are out of season, but for 5,000 extra, they can fly them in. I told them to put it on your card, Simone." I looked at her. Then I looked at Dante, who offered me a weak apologetic smile. My rage shifted. It was no longer a scattershot blast. It was a laser beam focused entirely on the woman standing in the doorway. I handed the phone back to Dante. "Perfect," I said. "Get the peonies. Get everything. Because you are going to pay for every single petal." I returned to my home office with the receipt for $10,000 worth of peonies burning a hole in my pocket. I had played the part of the submissive sister perfectly, but now it was time to close the trap. My computer hummed in the darkness, waiting for the final piece of the puzzle. My phone rang. It was Marcus, the private investigator. Usually Marcus sounded bored or cynical, but today his voice was tight. "Simone, are you sitting down?" he asked. "I am." What did you find? Did you find her doctor? That is the problem, Simone. I checked the insurance records. I checked the hospital databases. I even ran a search on every licensed OBGYN in Manhattan and Brooklyn under both her married name and her alias, Tabitha Vance. Simone, there are no records, no ultrasounds, no blood work, no prenatal vitamins prescriptions, nothing. I frowned. That is impossible. She posted a photo from a hospital bed just last week. Marcus sighed. I ran that photo through a metadata scrubber. It was taken 2 years ago. The EXIF data says it was shot in a clinic in Tampa, probably when she was getting a nose job. Simone, she is not pregnant. There is no baby. The room spun. I had suspected she was lying about money. I had suspected she was lying about her parents, but lying about a child, lying about the heir to a family she claimed to love. It was a level of sociopathy that even I could not comprehend. If she is not pregnant, then what is growing in her stomach? I whispered more to myself than to him. Check Dante's email again, Marcus said. Check the trash. Check the spam. She is sloppy, Simone. Cons like this always slip up on the small details. I hung up and logged back into Dante's email, which I had mirrored to my server. I went straight to the junk folder. It was filled with newsletters and phishing scams. I scrolled down looking for anything suspicious. And then I saw it. An order confirmation from Amazon dating back 3 months. Item shipped. Premium silicone maternity prop. Realistic touch and weight. Month 5 to 7 size. Light skin tone. I clicked the link. It took me to a product page for actors and theater productions. The item description boasted that the silicone warmed to body temperature and felt real to the touch through clothing. Cost: $400. She had bought a fake stomach on Amazon. She was wearing a costume. Every time she rubbed her belly, every time she complained about the baby kicking, she was performing a scene. She had orchestrated this entire pregnancy to trap Dante into marriage and to guilt my mother into handing over her savings. It was paternity fraud on a massive scale. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling with a cold fury. This was not just about stealing money anymore. This was emotional terrorism. She had made my mother cry tears of joy for a grandchild that did not exist. She had made my brother give up his dreams to support a piece of silicone. I printed the Amazon receipt. The ink was still warm as I held it. Tiffany wanted a baby shower. She wanted everyone to celebrate the life she was bringing into the world. Well, I would give her exactly what she wanted. I would celebrate the baby. I would celebrate the silicone prop that cost $400 and the lies that cost my family everything. The investigation was over. The execution was about to begin. The receipt for the silicone belly was the smoking gun, but I still needed to identify the accomplice. A con artist like Tiffany does not work alone, especially not on a job this complex. She needed someone on the outside to handle the logistics, someone to receive the money, and someone to help her disappear when the well ran dry. That brought me back to Chad. I pulled up the flight manifest again. Chad Miller. The name sounded generic enough, almost forgettable. I ran a cross-reference search with Tabitha Vance's known associates in Florida. The system churned for a moment before spitting out a public record that made my jaw drop. It was a marriage license, dated 5 years ago in Sarasota County. The groom was Chad Miller. The bride was Tabitha Vance. I searched for a divorce decree. There was none. I searched for a death certificate. There was none. Tiffany was not just lying about being pregnant. She was lying about being single. She was still legally married to Chad. That meant her marriage to my brother Dante was not just a sham, it was void ab initio. It was bigamy. But more importantly, it was the key to understanding the endgame. I looked at the incorporation papers for Blue Sky Consulting, the shell company that had been draining my brother's bank account. I had missed it the first time because I was looking for Tiffany's name. But there it was in the fine print. The registered agent for the LLC was Chad Miller. The picture was now complete and it was terrifying. Tiffany and Chad were running a sweetheart scam. Tiffany was the face of the operation, the honey trap who seduced the target and gained access to the family finances. Chad was the back end, the money launderer who set up the shell companies and booked the getaways. They were not using my money to build a nursery. They were building a retirement fund. The plan was obvious. Squeeze Dante and me for every penny we had through the pregnancy sympathy and the baby shower gifts. Once they hit their target amount, likely after the big payday at the plaza, Tiffany would stage a miscarriage or a family crisis and vanish. She would take the money, divorce Dante, and disappear back to Florida to reunite with her husband, leaving my brother heartbroken and bankrupt. My computer pinged. Marcus had just uploaded the surveillance photos from the Miami trip. I opened the folder, my finger hovering over the mouse. I needed visual confirmation. I needed proof that they were not just business partners but lovers conspiring against my family. The first photo showed them at the hotel bar. They were laughing, clinking glasses of champagne. The second photo showed them on the beach. Chad was applying sunscreen to her back. But the third photo was the nail in the coffin. It was taken by the pool. Tiffany was lying on a lounge chair and Chad was leaning over her. His hand was on her thigh and their lips were locked in a passionate kiss. There was no ambiguity here. This was not a brother. This was not a cousin. This was her husband. I stared at the image of them kissing, celebrating their heist while my brother sat in Brooklyn stressing about diaper prices. They looked so happy, so carefree, spending my hard-earned money. I saved the photo to my encrypted drive. I had everything I needed. I had the fake belly receipt. I had the bigamy proof. I had the money trail. And now I had the infidelity. Dante was going to be devastated, but better a broken heart than a ruined life. I closed the laptop. The plaza awaited. Tiffany wanted to be the center of attention. I was going to make sure she got exactly what she wished for. The spotlight was about to be blinding. The Plaza Hotel represents the pinnacle of New York luxury. Crystal chandeliers that cost more than most houses. Gold leaf detailing on the molding. Velvet drapes that swallowed the light. It was the perfect setting for a coronation, and that is exactly what Tiffany thought this was. She did not see a baby shower. She saw her ascension to the throne of the family she had conquered. I wrote the checks without flinching. $50,000 for the deposit, $12,000 for the catering, $6,000 for a custom 3-tier cake wrapped in edible gold. Every time I handed over a credit card, Tiffany's eyes lit up with a predatory gleam. She thought she had broken me. She thought I was buying her love, buying my way back into the family. She did not realize I was simply paying for the construction of her gallows. Tiffany's guest list was a study in narcissism. She invited 200 people. There were influencers she had never met but wanted to impress. There were the sorority sisters who had abandoned her at the restaurant, now back in the fold because there was an open bar. There were bloggers and local socialites. She even managed to get a photographer from a minor society magazine to attend, promising them an exclusive look at the life of a diplomat's daughter. She was building an audience for her triumph. I had a guest list too, but mine was much shorter and far more exclusive. I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Captain James Bennett of the NYPD 1st Precinct, a man I had helped uncover an embezzlement ring within the police union pension fund 3 years ago. The second was to Sarah Jenkins, the assistant district attorney, who was currently building a task force on interstate fraud. The third was to the security team I had hired privately. I told Tiffany they were just my boring work colleagues. Just some people from the office, I said, shrugging. They want to come support me. Tiffany had laughed, waving her hand dismissively. Fine. Let the nerds come. Just tell them to dress well. I do not want any cheap suits ruining the aesthetic of my photos. I smiled internally. Tiffany was so obsessed with appearances that she did not bother to ask what my colleagues actually did for a living. She saw a middle-aged man in a suit and assumed he was an accountant. She did not know that Captain Bennett was carrying a badge and a warrant in his breast pocket. She saw a sharp woman in a blazer and assumed she was a secretary. She did not know that Sarah Jenkins had the power to indict her before the dessert course was served. By Friday night, everything was in place. The flowers had arrived, the champagne was on ice, the silicone belly was strapped tight to Tiffany's waist. The trap was set and the bait was laid. I stood in the center of the empty ballroom the night before the event, looking at the stage where Tiffany would sit on her rented throne. It was going to be a bloodbath, but it would be a very elegant one. The Plaza Ballroom was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal waiting to be filled with lies. I stood near the entrance checking the placement of the gift table, which was already groaning under the weight of boxes from Tiffany's registry. Mama Louise arrived an hour early, wearing a hat that probably cost more than her mortgage payment. She looked around the room and sighed with deep satisfaction. "See, Simone," she said, clutching my arm. "This is what family does. We fix things. We do not drag each other down in public. I knew you would come to your senses. You just needed to cool off." I looked at her. She was beaming. She genuinely believed that I had simply accepted my role as the doormat. She thought my silence was submission. She did not see the shark tank she was swimming in. "You are right, Mama," I said, smoothing a wrinkle on her sleeve. "Family should always reveal the truth. That is exactly what we are going to do today." She patted my cheek, missing the double meaning entirely. "You are a good daughter. Now go help your brother. He looks like he is about to throw up." Dante was standing by the bar, adjusting his tuxedo collar for the 100th time. He did not look like a proud father-to-be. He looked like a man waiting for a firing squad. I walked over to him and swatted his hands away. "Stop fidgeting," I said, reaching up to fix his tie. "You look fine." He looked at me, his eyes wide and frightened. "Simone, are you sure about this? The press, the cost. It feels like too much. Tiffany is acting different. She is so focused on the cameras. She has not asked about the baby once today. She just keeps asking if the lighting is good for her angles." I tightened the knot of his tie perhaps a little too hard. He flinched. I looked him dead in the eye. "Dante, listen to me. I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. If the money disappeared today, if the fancy apartment and the designer clothes and the trips to Miami all vanished, if you were left with nothing but the shirt on your back, would you still be happy you married her?" Dante opened his mouth to answer automatically, but then he stopped. He looked over at Tiffany, who was currently screaming at a waiter about the placement of her throne chair. The fear in his eyes shifted into something sadder. Doubt. "I do not know," he whispered. "Sometimes I feel like I am just a prop in a movie she is directing. Last night I tried to feel the baby kick and she pushed me away. She said I was ruining her sleep. But Simone, I saw her taking sleeping pills 10 minutes later. Who takes sleeping pills when they are 7 months pregnant?" My heart broke a little for him. He knew. Deep down in his gut, he knew something was wrong. But he was too weak to face it. He preferred the beautiful lie to the ugly truth. I patted his chest. "Hold on to that feeling, Dante. Trust your gut, because in about an hour you are going to get your answer." I walked away before he could ask me what I meant. The doors were opening. The first guests were arriving. The trap was sprung. I signaled to the security team near the back exit. It was showtime. The party was in full swing, and it was a masterclass in superficiality. A string quartet played pop songs near the champagne fountain, while waiters circulated with trays of caviar blinis. Tiffany sat on a velvet throne chair rented for $500 an hour, looking like a queen presiding over her court. She was surrounded by a mountain of gifts. Boxes from Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue were stacked high, glistening under the chandeliers. Flashbulbs popped every time she lifted a box, smiling that practiced tight smile for the influencers she had invited. I stood by the bar, sipping sparkling water, watching the spectacle. Dante hovered near her, trying to be helpful, but she swatted him away every time he got too close to her stomach. She could not risk him feeling the silicone seams. Then came the moment that sealed her fate. My great-aunt Sarah, who was 80 years old and walked with a cane, made her way to the front of the line. She held a simple white box tied with a yellow ribbon. Aunt Sarah had arthritis. Her hands shook constantly, yet she had spent the last 6 months knitting a baby blanket by hand. It was a family tradition. Every new baby in our family received one. Tiffany tore the paper off, expecting another designer onesie. When she pulled out the soft yellow wool, her face twisted in disgust. She held it up with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "What is this?" she asked loudly, her voice cutting through the chatter. "It feels like steel wool. Is this supposed to be for a baby? It will scratch his skin off." Aunt Sarah looked stricken. "It is wool, honey. It breathes. I made it myself." Tiffany rolled her eyes and tossed the blanket onto the floor. It landed near a pile of discarded wrapping paper. "Well, thanks, I guess. But my baby only wears cashmere. Someone get this out of here before I get a rash just looking at it." A few of her friends giggled. Dante looked down at his shoes, too cowardly to defend the woman who had helped raise him. Aunt Sarah turned away, wiping a tear from her cheek. That was it. That was the final insult. She had not only stolen my money and my brother, she had spat on my heritage. She had disrespected an elder in front of a room full of strangers. The cold, mechanical rage I had been nursing for weeks suddenly crystallized into pure focus. I signaled the audio technician, a young man I had tipped heavily earlier, to follow my exact cues. He gave me a subtle nod. The string quartet faded out. The room grew quiet as the guests sensed a shift in the atmosphere. I walked toward the stage. My heels clicked against the marble floor, a rhythmic drumbeat of war. I stepped up to the microphone stand right next to Tiffany's throne. She looked up at me, annoyed that I was interrupting her gift grab. "What are you doing, Simone?" she hissed under her breath. I ignored her. I tapped the microphone twice. The sound echoed through the ballroom, drawing every eye to me. I looked out at the sea of faces, the influencers with their phones raised, the socialites, my mother, my brother, and the police officers disguised in cheap suits near the back. I smiled. It was the brightest, warmest smile I had worn in years. "Welcome, everyone," I said, my voice steady and commanding. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Tiffany and Dante. We have seen so many beautiful gifts today. But as the sister-in-law, I wanted to give Tiffany something truly special. Something that reveals exactly who she is." Tiffany beamed, preening for the cameras, thinking I was about to hand her keys to a car or a vacation. She had no idea I was holding the detonator. The microphone felt heavy in my hand, cold and metallic like a weapon. I stood on the stage, looking down at Tiffany, who was arranging the folds of her silk dress on the velvet throne. She looked up at me with eyes that held a mixture of warning and triumph. She thought she had won. She thought this speech was my public surrender. I took a deep breath and let the lies flow out of me like sweet poison. "Tiffany came into our lives like a force of nature," I began, my voice trembling with what everyone assumed was emotion. "She taught my brother Dante what it means to truly commit to something. She showed my mother that love is not just a feeling, it is an investment. A very expensive investment. And she taught me that sometimes you have to look past the surface to see the real person underneath." The room was silent. Tiffany squeezed Dante's hand, flashing a dazzling smile at the photographers. She nodded, encouraging me to continue praising her. She absorbed the compliments like a sponge, completely missing the double meaning behind every word. She thought I was talking about emotional growth. I was talking about financial ruin. I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make people uncomfortable. "But words are cheap," I said, my voice hardening slightly. "And Tiffany deserves more than just words. She deserves recognition. She deserves to have her contributions to this family displayed for the world to see." So I prepared a special video presentation, a visual journey of exactly what Tiffany has brought to the Brooks family name. I gestured to the massive projection screen behind me. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A collective hush fell over the crowd as 200 faces turned toward the white canvas. A soft, sentimental piano track began to play, the exact same royalty-free sad music Tiffany had used in her viral TikTok video accusing me of racism. Tiffany clapped her hands together delightedly, expecting a montage of ultrasound photos and romantic selfies. The screen flickered to life. The first image was a photo of Dante and Tiffany smiling on their wedding day. The crowd awed. Then the image distorted. A digital glitch effect that I had paid the editor extra to include ripped across the screen. The music warped, slowing down into a low, ominous drone. The wedding photo vanished. In its place, a stark, high-definition document appeared. It was magnified so large that the people in the back row could read the fine print. Chase Sapphire Reserve Statement. Account holder Simone Brooks. Authorized user Dante Brooks. The camera panned down the document on the screen, highlighting the numbers in bright red. Past due balance $32,400. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone dropped a glass and it shattered. The screen flashed again. American Express Platinum. Account opened fraudulently. Past due balance $28,000. The slide changed again. Capital One Venture. Past due balance $25,000. The total appeared in the center of the screen in bold black letters. $85,000 stolen. I watched Tiffany's face. The smug smile did not just fade, it evaporated. Her skin turned a sickly shade of gray under the stage lights. She tried to stand up, but her knees seemed to give way, and she slumped back onto her throne. The silence in the room was gone, replaced by a rising tide of whispers and shock. I leaned into the microphone, my voice booming over the confusion. But that is just the appetizers, folks. Let us get to the main course. The ballroom was already reeling from the financial shock, but I was not done. I pressed the remote again. The spreadsheet dissolved into a grainy video clip. It was time-stamped 2 weeks ago. The setting was the master bathroom of the apartment my brother paid for. In the video, Tiffany stood in front of the full-length mirror. She was wearing only her underwear. Her stomach was flat. Perfectly flat. There was no baby bump. There was no sign of pregnancy. She reached for a flesh-colored object on the counter. It was a prosthetic bump. With practiced ease, she strapped it around her waist, adjusting the Velcro until it sat seamless against her skin. She smoothed her hands over the silicone, turning side to side to check the profile. Then she picked up her phone and laughed. It was a cruel, mocking sound that echoed through the silent ballroom. She spoke into the receiver. "Chad, you should see me. I look like a glowing goddess. These idiots believe anything. Dante actually cried when I told him the baby kicked. He is so pathetic. As soon as the wire transfer clears, we are gone." The video froze on her laughing face. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. The gasp that tore through the crowd was louder than the music had been. The financial fraud was a white-collar crime. It was abstract. But this was visceral. This was a violation of the most sacred trust between a husband and wife. On the gigantic screen, Tiffany's digital doppelganger continued to preen, adjusting the silicone strap with the casual indifference of an actor putting on a costume. I watched the audience. The influencers who had been live-streaming the event were now capturing the scandal of the decade. Their phones were held high, zooming in on the screen, and then panning back to the real Tiffany, who sat paralyzed on her velvet chair. Her hands instinctively went to cover the fake bump, but she stopped halfway, realizing the futility of the gesture. The illusion was not just broken, it was pulverized. Mama Louise stood up, her legs shaking so hard she had to grab the table for support. Her champagne flute slipped from her fingers, hitting the marble floor with a sharp, violent crash that made half the room jump. She looked from the screen to me and then to Tiffany, the woman she had defended, the woman she had chosen over her own daughter. The realization hit her like a physical blow. There was no grandchild, there was no legacy, there was only a piece of plastic and a con artist laughing at her gullibility. Tiffany's face was a mask of sheer terror. For the first time, the arrogance was gone. She looked small, she looked trapped. Her eyes darted around the room looking for an exit, looking for an ally, but she found only disgust. Even her sorority sisters had backed away, creating a physical distance between themselves and the social pariah. And then there was Dante, my brother, the boy who wore his heart on his sleeve. He stood up slowly, as if carrying the weight of the world. He stared at the screen, watching the woman he loved call him pathetic. He watched her mock his tears. The dots finally connected in his mind. The times she pushed him away in bed, the refusal to let him come to doctor appointments, the sleeping pills. It all made sickening sense now. He turned to face her. His body was vibrating with tremors he could not control. He walked toward the throne, his steps heavy and uneven. He stopped inches from her knees. He did not scream. He did not rage. He just pointed a shaking finger at the screen and then at her midsection. "What is this?" he asked, his voice cracking into 1,000 pieces. "Tiffany, tell me that is AI. Tell me that is fake. Because if you are wearing a costume right now, while my family is celebrating you, I swear to God." "What is this?" I did not answer Dante immediately. I let the silence hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. The silicone belly was a prop, but the next piece of evidence was very real. I pressed the remote one last time. The video of the fake bump vanished. In its place, a high-resolution photograph filled the massive screen. It was a picture taken in Miami. The sun was bright, the ocean was blue, and the subjects were unmistakable. Tiffany was wearing a white bikini, her body pressed intimately against a man with sandy blonde hair and a shark-like grin. They were not just standing together. They were kissing. It was a deep, passionate kiss. The kind shared by lovers who have no care in the world. Dante stared at the screen. He knew that man. "That is Chad," he whispered, his voice trembling. "That is her cousin. He helped us move. He came to our house for Christmas." I spoke into the microphone, my voice slicing through his confusion. "He is not her cousin Dante, and he is certainly not just a friend." The slide changed again. This time it was a document, a marriage license issued by Sarasota County, Florida. It was dated 5 years ago. The names were printed in black and white: Chad Miller and Tabitha Vance. There was no divorce decree attached. There was no annulment. The seal of the court was visible at the bottom, valid and active. "Ladies and gentlemen, please meet Chad Miller," I announced, gesturing to the screen. "You might know him as the helpful cousin or the silent business partner behind Blue Sky Consulting. But the state of Florida knows him as Tiffany's husband, her legal husband." The crowd gasped in unison. The sound was like all the oxygen being sucked out of the room. Dante looked from the screen to Tiffany, his eyes wide with horror. "You are married," he choked out. "You are already married. Then what am I?" I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at my brother. "You were never the husband, Dante. You were the mark. You were the bank account. You were the ATM they withdrew from every time they wanted a vacation or a new handbag. Every dollar you sent to that consulting firm went straight into their joint account. You were funding their retirement while they laughed at you behind your back." Something inside Tiffany snapped. The carefully constructed mask of the victim fell away completely, revealing the feral, desperate creature underneath. She let out a scream that sounded less like a human and more like a wounded animal. "You bitch!" she shrieked, her face twisting into a mask of pure hatred. "Turn it off! Turn it off right now!" She kicked off her heels and lunged toward the stage. She moved with a speed I did not expect, her hands curled into claws, reaching for me, reaching for the microphone, reaching for anything she could destroy. She was going to tear me apart. She was going to silence the truth with violence. But she never made it to the stairs. A large man in a dark suit stepped out from the shadows near the cake table. It was not a hotel employee. It was one of the security professionals I had hired for this exact moment. He moved with the efficiency of a machine, stepping directly into her path. He did not grab her. He simply stood there, a wall of muscle that she slammed into with a thud. Tiffany bounced off him, stumbling back. She tried to go around him, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. "Get out of my way!" she yelled, striking at his chest. "I am going to kill her!" The guard did not flinch. He simply held up a hand, firmly blocking her path. "Ma'am, I suggest you step back," he said, his voice calm but dangerous. Tiffany looked around, wild-eyed, realizing she was surrounded. The press was capturing every second of her meltdown. Her husband Chad was nowhere to be seen. and her other husband, Dante, was looking at her like she was a stranger. The trap was closed, and there was nowhere left to run. The security guard held Tiffany back, but I did not need him to protect me. I had one final blow to deliver. A blow that would shatter not just her reputation, but the very biological lie she had used to hold my family hostage. I turned back to the microphone. Tiffany, you screamed about killing me, but you should have saved that energy for the doctor who performed your surgery 3 years ago. I pressed the remote. The marriage license vanished. In its place, a medical record from a clinic in Tampa appeared. It was redacted to show only the patient's name, Tabitha Vance, and the procedure code. For those of you who are not medical professionals, let me explain what CPT code 58670 means. I said, my voice echoing through the silent ballroom. It stands for a laparoscopic tubal ligation. In simple terms, Tiffany had her tubes tied 3 years ago. Gasps erupted again, but this time they were different. They were horrified. That is right, I continued, pointing at the screen. There is no baby. There never was a baby. There is absolutely zero chance of a baby. The only thing growing in her stomach is a web of lies designed to extract money from a family that just wanted to love her. Tiffany stopped struggling against the guard. She went limp. The truth was out. The one lie she thought was untouchable, the biological imperative, had been exposed. She looked at Dante. Dante was standing still, frozen in a nightmare. He looked at the medical record, then back at his wife. The woman who had picked out names with him. The woman who had decorated a nursery with him. The woman who had let him talk to her stomach at night. It was all a performance. A cruel, sick performance. A primal sound tore from Dante's throat. It was not a scream. It was a roar of pure agony. He moved before anyone could stop him. He lunged past the security guard, who stepped aside this time, allowing the husband to face his wife. Dante reached Tiffany in 2 strides. She tried to back away, her eyes wide with terror, but he was faster. He did not hit her. He did not choke her. He reached for the hem of her silk dress and yanked it up. His hand clawed at the strap around her waist. "No, Dante, stop!" she shrieked, trying to push him away. He didn't listen. With a violent jerk, he unlatched the Velcro strap that held the silicone prop in place. He ripped it from her body. The heavy silicone belly fell to the marble floor with a sickening wet thud. It bounced once and rolled to a stop at the feet of the photographer. Tiffany stood there exposed. Her stomach was perfectly flat. Her dress hung loosely around her frame. The illusion was physically separated from her body, lying on the floor like a discarded toy. The room went deathly silent. The sight of the fake belly on the floor was more shocking than any bank statement. It was grotesque. It was undeniable proof of a sociopathic level of deceit. Mama Louise, who had been clutching the edge of the table, let out a soft whimper. She looked at the plastic stomach, then at her son's devastated face. Her eyes rolled back in her head. Her knees buckled. She collapsed to the floor in a heap of expensive silk and broken dreams, fainting dead away amidst the wreckage of her family. The crash of my mother hitting the floor was the signal my guests had been waiting for. The time for theater was over. The boring colleagues in the ill-fitting suits whom Tiffany had mocked earlier suddenly transformed. They did not rush to help Mama Louise. They rushed the stage. Captain James Bennett stepped out from the shadows near the dessert table. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a gold badge that caught the light of the chandelier. The flashbulbs from the press went into overdrive. This was the twist they had been praying for. "Tabitha Vance," he boomed, his voice commanding the room. "I am Captain Bennett with the NYPD. You are under arrest." Tiffany looked at him, blinking rapidly. She tried to step back, but the security guard was still blocking her path. "Arrest?" she stammered. "For what?" "This is a misunderstanding. My sister-in-law is crazy. She is making all of this up." Bennett did not entertain her delusions. He pulled a folded document from his pocket and began to read. "We have a warrant for your arrest on multiple counts. First count, identity theft in the 1st degree. Second count, grand larceny for the theft of over $85,000. Third count, wire fraud. And finally, bigamy. The word bigamy hung in the air, the legal confirmation that she was still married to Chad. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Jenkins stepped up beside Bennett. She looked at Tiffany with cold professional disdain. And we are also looking into charges of insurance fraud regarding your falsified medical records, Ms. Vance. You are looking at 20 years minimum. I suggest you stop talking and start looking for a lawyer. Two uniformed officers moved in, flanking her on both sides. They grabbed her arms, pulling them behind her back. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was the loudest sound in the room. That was the moment the dam broke. Tiffany realized the act was over. The tears would not work. The pregnancy card had been played and burned. She looked at the handcuffs, then at the cameras, then at me. Her face contorted. It was not fear anymore. It was pure, unadulterated ugliness. She stopped struggling and let out a laugh that sounded demonic. "You think you won," she screamed, spitting in my direction. "You think you are so smart, Simone. You are just a lonely, bitter woman." Dante, who was kneeling beside our mother, looked up at her. He looked broken. "Tiffany, how could you?" he whispered. "We loved you." Tiffany looked down at him and sneered. "Loved me. You suffocated me. I did what I had to do to survive. I deserved that money. I deserved better than this trash." She pulled against the officers, her eyes wild. "You are all pathetic," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the walls. "I am glad I did it. I am glad I took every cent. Because you people are so stupid. You honest, hardworking idiots. You made it so easy. You stupid black family. You thought a girl like me would actually love a loser like you." The room gasped. The racial slur hung heavy in the air. The influencers who had been sympathetic moments ago now looked at her with revulsion. The mask of the sweet, victimized white woman had not just slipped. It had shattered into a million pieces, revealing the racist narcissist underneath. Dante stood up slowly. The love in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow realization. He finally saw her. He finally saw the monster I had been trying to warn him about. "Get her out of here," he said, his voice flat. "Just get her out." The officers shoved her forward. As they dragged her off the stage, kicking and screaming curses, the only thing left behind was the silicone belly lying on the floor, a hollow shell, just like the woman who had worn it. Outside the gilded walls of the plaza, the city moved with its usual indifference, but inside a black SUV idling in the loading zone, Chad Miller was checking his watch for the 10th time. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel of the rental car that I had unknowingly paid for. He was not worried about my family or the baby. He was worried about the schedule. According to their plan, Tiffany was supposed to be walking out those doors right now, claiming a migraine, carrying a bag full of cash envelopes and jewelry. He picked up his phone and typed a message. "Hurry up. We need to beat the traffic to the airport." He never hit send. A heavy knock on the driver's side window made him jump. Chad looked up, expecting to see a valet telling him to move. Instead, he saw the grim face of a plainclothes detective holding a badge against the glass. Before Chad could even reach for the ignition, a police cruiser screeched around the corner, blocking him in from the front. Another pulled up tight behind him. He was boxed in. The door was yanked open. "Step out of the vehicle," Mr. Miller, the detective, barked. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Chad tried to play the innocent tourist. "Whoa, what is going on? I am just waiting for my wife. I mean my cousin. We are going to a party." The detective grabbed him by the collar and hauled him out onto the pavement. "We know exactly who you are waiting for. And we know she is not your cousin. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and money laundering." As they slammed Chad against the hood of the car to frisk him, the revolving doors of the hotel spun open. The timing was poetic. Tiffany stumbled out into the cool evening air, not with the grace of a socialite, but with the desperate, stumbling gait of a prisoner. She was flanked by two officers, her hands cuffed tightly behind her back. her silk dress twisted and disheveled. Then the flashbulbs started. Tiffany had insisted on inviting the press. She had sent press releases to every blog and tabloid in the city promising the event of the season. She had wanted the world to see her, and now they would. The photographers who had been waiting for a glamour shot now scented blood. They swarmed the entrance like sharks. The flashing lights were blinding, a strobe light effect that illuminated Tiffany's tear-stained face in harsh, unforgiving bursts. "Tiffany, look over here. Is it true you faked the pregnancy? How much money did you steal? Are you really married to your cousin?" The questions were shouted like accusations. Tiffany ducked her head, trying to hide from the very lenses she had courted. She squeezed her eyes shut, but she could not block out the sound of the shutters clicking, capturing her downfall at 10 frames per second. Then she saw him. Through the wall of photographers, she locked eyes with Chad, who was currently being stuffed into the back of a squad car. There was no love in that look. There was no solidarity. They looked at each other with the pure, venomous hatred of rats trapped in a sinking ship. Chad mouthed something that looked like a curse word before the door slammed shut on his face. "Get them away from me!" Tiffany screamed, thrashing against the officers as a cameraman got too close. "I did not do anything. It was all him. He made me do it." The police ignored her pleas. They guided her firmly toward the second cruiser. She was shoved into the back seat, the hard plastic seat, a far cry from the velvet throne she had sat on an hour ago. As the car pulled away, sirens wailing, the photographers chased it down the block, eager for one last shot of the woman who tried to steal a life and ended up losing her own. The show was over. The credits were rolling, and Tiffany was finally the star she always wanted to be. The police sirens faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence that was heavier than the noise. The grand ballroom of the plaza was now a graveyard of expensive party favors. Waiters moved quietly in the background, sweeping up the shattered remains of Mama Louise's champagne glass and collecting the unopened gifts that Tiffany would never unwrap. The air still smelled of fresh peonies and expensive perfume, but underneath it was the stench of catastrophe. I stood near the overturned throne chair, watching the staff dismantle the stage I had built. My heart was not racing anymore. It beat with a slow, steady rhythm. The war was over. The enemy had been neutralized. But now came the cleanup, and that is often the hardest part. Dante sat on the edge of the stage, his tuxedo jacket discarded on the floor. He held his head in his hands, sobbing quietly. He looked like a child who had woken up from a nightmare only to realize the monster was real. He saw my shoes approach, and he slid off the stage, dropping to his knees on the cold marble floor. He wrapped his arms around my legs, burying his face in the fabric of my dress. "I am sorry, Simone," he wept, his voice muffled and broken. "I am so sorry. I was so stupid. I let her turn me against you. I let her steal from you. I am a terrible brother. Please forgive me. Please tell me how to fix this." I looked down at him. A part of me, the big sister who had tied his shoes and helped him with homework, wanted to drop to my knees and hold him. I wanted to tell him it was going to be okay, and that I would take care of everything. But that is what I had done his whole life. I had shielded him from consequences, and that protection had made him soft. It had made him the perfect prey for a predator like Tiffany. I reached down and peeled his hands off me. I did not pull him up. I took a step back, creating a distance that felt like a canyon. "Get up, Dante," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "Stop crying. Tears do not pay bills." He looked up at me, startled by my tone. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. I know. I will pay you back, Simone. I swear. I will work 3 jobs. I will do whatever it takes." I shook my head. "You are confused. You do not owe me for the $85,000 on my credit cards. The police report and the fraud affidavit I filed this morning will take care of that. The bank will absolve me of those charges because they were criminal acts committed by Tiffany and Chad. That debt is hers, and she will pay for it with years of her life in a cell." Dante let out a breath of relief. "Oh, thank God. Thank you, Simone." I held up a hand to stop him. Do not thank me yet. Because we need to talk about the other money. The money you transferred to Blue Sky Consulting from your own accounts. The loans you took out in your own name to buy her jewelry. The lease on that apartment you cannot afford. Dante blinked. But she tricked me. It was a scam. It was a scam, I agreed. But you signed the papers, Dante. You authorized the transfers. You chose to ignore the red flags because you liked the fantasy she sold you. The law protects you from theft, but it does not protect you from bad judgment. He stared at me, the blood draining from his face again. What are you saying? I am saying that I am not writing a check to clear your personal debts, I said firmly. I am not bailing you out of your lease. You are going to move out of that luxury apartment. You are going to sell those designer clothes. You are going to negotiate with your creditors. You are going to climb out of this hole dollar by dollar on your own. But Simone, I cannot do that alone, he whispered, panic rising in his voice. I will drown. Then learn to swim, I said. I looked him dead in the eye, delivering the final verdict. I saved you from prison today, Dante. I saved you from a life anchored to a sociopath. But I will not save you from your own stupidity. That is a lesson you have to afford yourself. The interrogation room at the first precinct was a stark contrast to the ballroom at the plaza. There were no chandeliers here, only the buzzing of a fluorescent light that flickered overhead. I stood behind the one-way glass, with Zara watching the final act of Tiffany's performance. She was still wearing her ruined silk dress now, stained with sweat and mascara. She was not handcuffed anymore, but she looked more trapped than ever sitting across from Detective Bennett. Tiffany was not remaining silent. She was talking a mile a minute, trying to spin a web out of nothing. It was not a confession. It was a list of excuses. You do not understand, she sobbed, her voice cracking. I am a victim of my environment. Do you know who my parents are? Dickie and Linda Vance. They dragged me from state to state running scams since I was 5 years old. I never went to a real school. I learned how to count by counting stolen change. I did not want to do this. They forced me. They said if I did not send them money, they would expose me. I watched her face. It was a masterful lie. She was trying to paint herself as the reluctant daughter coerced into crime. She was throwing her own parents under the bus to save her skin. But I knew the truth. I had seen the texts. She was not a victim. She was the ringleader. She was the one mocking Dante. She was the one buying the silicone belly. Bennett was not buying it either. He slid a folder across the metal table. We have the text logs, Tiffany. We have the messages between you and Chad laughing about the idiot Brooks family. We have the emails where you set up the shell company. Your parents are in a trailer park in Tampa. They have not spoken to you in 2 years. You did this all on your own. Tiffany stopped crying instantly. The mask dropped. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes cold and dead. Fine. So I took their money. They have plenty of it. Simone acts like she is so perfect with her penthouse and her suits. She deserved to lose a little. I was just redistributing the wealth. The feed cut as Zara signaled for us to leave. We walked to the courtroom for the arraignment. This was where the real battle would happen. Tiffany's public defender, a tired man with a cheap suit, asked the judge for bail. He argued that Tiffany was a pregnant woman, a habit he quickly corrected, a vulnerable woman with strong community ties. Zara stepped forward. She was a shark in the water. Your Honor, representing the victim, I must strenuously object. The defendant has 3 known aliases. She is currently married to a co-conspirator who was also arrested today. She has no permanent residence in this state, and we have evidence of offshore accounts meant for flight. She is not a community member. She is a flight risk with a history of disappearing. The judge looked at the evidence. The fake pregnancy, the bigamy, the sheer scale of the deception. He banged his gavel. Bail is denied. The defendant will be remanded to custody pending trial. Tiffany gasped. She looked back at the gallery, searching for Dante, searching for anyone to save her, but the seats were empty. I had sent Dante home. Zara walked out with me to the steps of the courthouse. She checked her notes and gave me the bottom line. With the amount stolen plus the identity theft and the bigamy charge, We are looking at a plea deal of 5 years minimum. If she fights it and loses, she gets 7. She is not going to Miami, Simone. She is going to Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. I nodded, looking out at the city skyline. Tiffany wanted a life of luxury where she did not have to work. In a twisted way, she got her wish. She would have a roof over her head and 3 meals a day for the next decade. She just would not be wearing silk while she ate them. The sound of a heart monitor beeping in a steady rhythm is usually comforting, but in the VIP wing of Mount Sinai Hospital, it sounded like a countdown. Mama Louise was lying in the bed, hooked up to an IV drip. The doctors called it a hypertensive crisis brought on by acute shock. I called it a reality check. The woman who had ruled our family with an iron fist and a loud voice looked incredibly small against the white sheets. Her skin was gray. Her breathing was shallow. The invincible matriarch had been broken not by a disease, but by the weight of her own foolishness. I sat in the uncomfortable vinyl chair in the corner of the room. I did not sit by the bedside. I did not hold her hand. I kept a physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm between us. I had paid for the private room. I had spoken to the doctors. I had done my duty as a daughter. But I could not force myself to offer comfort to the woman who had demanded I kneel before a thief. Her eyes fluttered open. It took a moment for her to focus on me. When she did, her eyes filled with tears. They spilled over, running down her temples into her hair. "Simone," she whispered, her voice a raspy croak. "You are here. I thought you would leave me. After everything I said, I thought you would let me rot." I crossed my legs and looked at her steadily. "I am not Dante, Mama. I do not run away from messes. I clean them up." She flinched at the mention of my brother. Dante was currently sleeping on my couch because the police had sealed his apartment as a crime scene. "I was so blind, Simone," she cried. "I wanted grandbabies so bad. I wanted Dante to be happy." She played me like a fiddle. And I let her. "I treated you like the enemy because you were the only one speaking the truth. I called you a traitor. I said you were jealous. Oh God, Simone, can you ever forgive me?" I looked at the ceiling, counting the tiles. Forgiveness is a heavy word. It implies that the slate is wiped clean. But I could not wipe the memory of her screaming at me in my own doorway. I could not forget how easily she believed a stranger over the daughter who had paid her mortgage for 10 years. "Forgiveness takes time, Mama," I said, my voice cool and even. "Trust takes even longer. You broke us. You chose the fantasy over the family. We can move forward, but things cannot go back to how they were. I am not your bank, and I am not your punching bag anymore." She nodded weakly, closing her eyes as a fresh wave of shame washed over her. "I know. I am an old fool. I do not trust myself anymore. I look at people and I do not know if they are lying or telling the truth. I have lost my instinct." She reached for her purse, which sat on the bedside table. Her hands shook violently as she fumbled with the clasp. She pulled out a thick leather-bound folder. It contained the deed to the family home, the access codes to her retirement accounts, and the power of attorney documents she had held onto for decades, refusing to let anyone else manage the estate. She held the folder out to me. Her arm trembled, but her gaze was firm. "Take it," she said. "Take it all. The house, the accounts, the decisions. I am done. I almost lost everything because I was stubborn and blind. You are the only one who saw the wolf when she was wearing sheep's clothing. You are the head of this family now, Simone. Lead us better than I did." I stood up and walked to the bed. I took the folder. It felt heavy in my hands. It was not a gift. It was a surrender. I looked down at my mother, who had finally learned the hardest lesson of her life. I accepted the burden not with joy, but with the grim satisfaction of a soldier taking command of a battlefield. I would save this family. But I would do it my way. The liquidation of the Brooklyn apartment was not a garage sale. It was an autopsy of a lifestyle that never actually existed. I stood in the doorway with a clipboard, watching Dante dismantle his delusions piece by piece. He did not hire movers. I told him that if he wanted to leave, he had to carry the boxes himself. He listed the limited edition sneakers on resale apps. The Air Jordans he had bragged about sold for $400. The designer hoodies fetched a fraction of their retail price. Watching him pack them was painful. He was not just packing clothes. He was packing away the persona Tiffany had constructed for him. The successful businessman, the provider, the father. All of it was going into cardboard boxes labeled donation or sell. When the apartment was empty, echoing with the ghosts of his mistakes, Dante handed the keys to the landlord. He did not look back. He drove his old sedan to Mama Louise's house. He did not go to his old bedroom upstairs, which was preserved like a shrine. He went to the basement. It was damp. It smelled of mildew and mothballs. It was a concrete box with a single small window near the ceiling. "This is it," I told him, standing at the top of the stairs. "You stay here until you are solvent. No rent, but you pay for your own food. And you pay me $500 a month toward the debt." Dante nodded. He did not complain about the smell or the hard cot. He seemed to welcome the discomfort as a form of penance. The next day, he did not put on a suit. He put on steel-toed boots and a high-visibility vest. He had applied for a job at a logistics distribution center in Queens. It was not a desk job. It was grunt work, heavy lifting, 12-hour shifts packing boxes and loading trucks. I visited him 2 weeks later at the end of his shift. He walked out of the warehouse looking different. He was thinner. His hands were covered in small cuts and calluses. He walked with a limp from standing on concrete floors all day. The soft boy who used to complain about the air conditioning being too cold in his office was gone. He saw me waiting in my car and walked over. He did not ask for money. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a white envelope. His hands were rough and stained with grease. "Here," he said, handing it to me. "It is $400. It is all I have left after buying groceries and a bus pass." I took the envelope. It was light. A drop in the ocean compared to what he owed. "I did the math, Simone," he said, leaning against the car door. "I make $18 an hour. That dinner Tiffany ordered at the steakhouse, the one with the Wagyu beef and the vintage wine, that cost $600. I have to lift boxes for 33 hours just to pay for that one meal. 33 hours of my life for something she ate in 30 minutes. He looked at his hands, shaking his head. "I never understood. I just swiped the card. I never thought about the sweat that goes into the dollar. I thought money was just magic." I looked at my brother. He was exhausted. He was broke. He was living in a basement. But for the first time in his life, he was a man. He was not defined by a woman or a credit score. He was defined by the ache in his back and the cash in that envelope. "Keep working, Dante," I said, starting the engine. "You have a long way to go, but at least you are finally walking in the right direction." The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt different this time. 3 weeks ago, I had descended these floors in a cloud of shame, flanked by security guards like a criminal. Today, the ascent felt like a launch sequence. I held my keycard against the sensor. It did not blink red. It chirped a cheerful green. Access granted. I walked through the glass doors of City Trust, and the silence that greeted me was not one of judgment, but of reverence. The whispers had stopped. The side eyes were replaced by nods of respect. They knew. Everyone knew. The news of Tiffany's arrest and the massive fraud scheme had not just hit the tabloids, it had circulated through the industry grapevines. I was not the villain anymore. I was the survivor who took down a crime ring from her living room. Janice from HR was waiting for me. She did not sit behind her desk this time. She stood at the door, wringing her hands, looking smaller than I remembered. "Simone," she began, her voice tight, "we owe you an apology. We reacted to the noise of social media instead of waiting for the facts. The suspension is lifted immediately with full back pay." I nodded, accepting the apology without warmth. It was a corporate apology calculated to avoid a lawsuit, but I did not care. I had bigger things on my mind. Janice gestured to the conference room. "Mr. Sterling wants to see you." Mr. Sterling was the senior managing partner. He rarely spoke to anyone below the C-suite. I walked into the boardroom. He was standing by the window looking out at the Hudson River. "Simone," he said, turning around, "I read the police report, and I read the internal audit you did on your brother's finances. It was ruthless and brilliant." He tapped a file on the table. "You found discrepancies that the bank's fraud algorithms missed. You traced shell companies through layers of obfuscation that would have confused the FBI. You treated your own life like a crime scene and you solved it." "I simply did my job, sir," I replied. "No," Sterling said, shaking his head. "You did more than that. We have a problem at this firm, Simone. We are good at numbers, but we are bad at people. We miss the behavioral red flags. We need someone who understands that fraud is not just about math. It is about psychology. It is about manipulation." He slid a contract across the polished mahogany table. "We are creating a new position. Global Director of Risk Control. You will not just be auditing spreadsheets anymore. You will be auditing our biggest clients. You will be training our teams to spot the liars before they steal a cent." I looked at the salary figure. It was double what I was making. It included stock options and a corner office on the 55th floor. It was the kind of promotion that usually took 20 years to earn. I picked up the pen. The nightmare with Tiffany had stripped me of my savings and my trust. But it had given me something invaluable. It had sharpened my instincts into a razor blade. I signed my name. Later that afternoon, I checked my phone. The notification came from TikTok. The video of Tiffany crying had been removed for violating community guidelines on harassment and misinformation. In its place was a generic statement from the platform apologizing for the error. The hashtag "toxic sister-in-law" was gone buried under a wave of new comments praising me as the Sherlock Holmes of the Upper East Side. I stood by the window of my new office, looking down at the city. The cars looked like toys from up here. I had lost a sister-in-law, but I had found my true calling. I was no longer just an auditor. I was a hunter. And business was good. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. It had been 6 months since the debacle at the plaza. 6 months of depositions, affidavits, and meetings with the district attorney. The seasons had changed outside. Winter had turned to a slushy gray spring. But inside the Manhattan criminal court, time felt suspended in a perpetual state of fluorescent-lit judgment. I sat in the front row of the gallery. I was not there as a victim. I was the state's star witness. Beside me sat Dante. He was not wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a simple button-down shirt and slacks that he had bought from a discount rack. His hands were clasped tightly in his lap. He looked older. The softness around his jaw was gone, replaced by the lean, hungry look of a man who works physical labor for a living. He did not look at the defense table. He stared straight ahead at the judge's bench. When the bailiff announced the entrance of the defendant, I felt Dante stiffen. I turned my head. The woman who walked through the side door was a stranger. Tiffany Vance was gone. In her place was inmate number 84732. The prison system had stripped her of every weapon she possessed. There were no hair extensions. Her blonde hair had grown out, revealing 3 inches of dark, mousy roots. There was no contouring makeup to hide the hollowness of her cheeks. Her skin, which used to glow with expensive serums, was pale and breakout-prone. She wore a shapeless beige jumpsuit that swallowed her frame. She did not strut, she shuffled. Her ankles were shackled, and the metallic clinking sound echoed through the silent room. She looked at the gallery, searching for a friendly face but finding none. Her eyes met mine for a brief second. There was no fire left in them, no smugness, just a dull, flat resignation. She looked away quickly, unable to bear the weight of my gaze. I took the stand when called. My testimony was clinical. I did not cry. I did not rant. I simply walked the jury through the timeline. I explained the forensic accounting. I explained the shell companies. I explained the fake medical records. I presented the facts with the same cold precision I used in my boardroom presentations. The jury did not need emotion. The numbers were damning enough. When the judge asked me about the impact of her crimes, I looked directly at Tiffany. It was not just the $85,000, I said, my voice steady. It was the emotional bankruptcy. She took a family that was whole and she fractured it for profit. She monetized our love. That is a debt that can never be repaid. The deliberation took less than 2 hours. The jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts. Tiffany did not react. She sat frozen, staring at a spot on the table. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked down at her. Ms. Vance, you have shown a predatory pattern of behavior. You exploited the trust of your husband and his family with a level of calculation that is chilling. This court finds no reason for leniency. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. I sentence you to 6 years in a state correctional facility, followed by 3 years of parole. You are also ordered to pay full restitution to the victims. 6 years. The gavel came down with a sharp final crack. It sounded like a gunshot ending a long, painful war. Tiffany flinched. Her shoulders slumped as if the invisible strings holding her up had been cut. She did not scream. She did not beg. She simply held out her wrists for the bailiff to handcuff her. As they led her away, she turned her head one last time, looking for Dante. She opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to say his name, perhaps to apologize. But Dante stood up and turned his back on her, walking toward the exit without a backward glance. The door to the holding cell clicked shut, and just like that, the golden girl of the Upper East Side was gone, erased by the system she thought she could outsmart. The ink was barely dry on the deed when I walked into the foyer of the brownstone in Cobble Hill. It was a far cry from the glass and steel penthouse in Manhattan. That place had been a fortress, a cold tower where I looked down on the world. This place felt different. It had creaky floorboards and warm brick walls. It had a garden in the back, where the only thing growing was actual grass, not lies. It was grounded. And for the first time in a year, I felt grounded too. I was unpacking the last box of books when the doorbell rang. I did not flinch. I did not dread who was on the other side. I knew exactly who it was because I had invited him. Marcus stood on the stoop holding a bottle of aged bourbon and a housewarming plant that looked surprisingly resilient. He was not wearing his usual trench coat. He was wearing a fitted leather jacket and a smile that did not look cynical for once. "Nice place, Simone," he said, stepping inside and looking around with a professional eye. "Good sightlines, sturdy locks. I approve." I took the plant from him. High praise coming from the most paranoid man in New York. "Come in. The boxes are barely open, but I think I can find 2 glasses." We sat on the back patio watching the sun dip below the skyline. The air was cool and crisp. For months, my interactions with Marcus had been transactional. Brief phone calls, exchange of documents, grim updates about felony charges. But today the case was closed, the bill was paid, and what remained was a comfortable silence that did not need to be filled with strategies. "You know," Marcus said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, "usually when I finish a job, the client never wants to see me again. I remind them of the worst time in their lives. They want to forget the mess." I took a sip of the bourbon. It burned in a good way. "I am not trying to forget the mess, Marcus. The mess made me who I am. Besides, you were the only one who did not lie to me. In my world, that is a rare currency." He looked at me, his dark eyes catching the last of the light. "You saved yourself, Simone. I just dug up the dirt. You were the one who had the courage to look at it." There was a moment then, a shift in the air. It was not the lightning strike of a romance novel. It was something slower, a recognition of shared competence. He respected my strength, and I respected his truth. In a life filled with people trying to extract value from me, here was a man who brought his own to the table. He clinked his glass against mine. "To new beginnings." "To independence," I corrected him with a smile. I looked out at the garden. My phone was in the kitchen, silent. My brother was building his own life. My mother was managing her own peace. And I was here in a house I bought with my own hard-earned money, sitting next to a man who knew all my secrets and stayed anyway. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the fresh evening air. I had won the war. Now, finally, I was going to enjoy the peace. The city lights of New York glitter below me, not as a chaotic sprawl, but as a grid of endless possibilities. From the balcony of my new brownstone, the noise of the traffic is just a distant hum. I swirl the remaining bourbon in my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the reflection of the moon. It has been a long road from the interrogation room to this quiet garden. I have lost money. I have lost friends. I have lost the naive version of myself who thought that family loyalty was a suicide pact. But looking at the peace I have built around me, I know I have gained so much more. We are often taught that boundaries are selfish. We are raised to believe that saying no to family is a betrayal, especially as women and especially as providers. We are conditioned to be the fixers, the safety nets, the silent bankers who keep the lights on while everyone else plays in the dark. I spent years thinking that if I just gave enough, paid enough, and tolerated enough, I would earn their respect. I thought I could buy peace. But I learned the hard way that you cannot buy respect from people who profit from your disrespect. Predators like Tiffany do not stop because you are kind. They stop only when you cut off the supply. And sometimes the people we love, like my brother and my mother, become accomplices, not because they are evil, but because they are weak. They chose the comfortable lie over the difficult truth. My audit did not just expose a financial crime. It exposed the rot in the foundation of my relationships. It taught me that a boundary is not a wall that shuts people out. It is a gate that protects the garden. It dictates what gets to come in and what has to stay out. I let the love in. I let the truth in. But the entitlement, the manipulation, and the emotional blackmail, those stop at the gate. I do not regret what I did at the plaza. Some might call it cruel to air dirty laundry in public. I call it necessary sterilization. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. By speaking up, I did not just save my bank account. I saved my brother's future. I saved my mother's dignity. And most importantly, I saved my own soul. I learned that I am not responsible for other people's choices, only for my reaction to them. I stopped setting myself on fire just to keep other people warm. Now I turn the question to you. We all have a Tiffany in our lives. Maybe they are not faking a pregnancy or stealing $85,000. Maybe they are just borrowing money they never pay back. Maybe they are guilt-tripping you into silence. Maybe they are draining your energy instead of your wallet. I want you to look at your life and ask yourself the hard questions. Who are you enabling? Where are your boundaries? And are you brave enough to close the account when the cost becomes too high? This has been my story. My name is Simone Brooks, and this was my final audit. If you saw yourself in my struggle, or if you have overcome your own toxic family dynamics, I want to hear about it. Share your story in the comments below. Let us build a community that values truth over silence. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice and redemption. Until next time, protect your peace and check your bank statements. The music rises and fades to black. The most profound lesson from this saga is that blind loyalty is a recipe for bankruptcy, both financial and emotional. We often confuse support with enabling, believing that loving our family means shielding them from the consequences of their poor decisions. Simone's journey proves that setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty, but an act of survival. By refusing to be the silent financier of her brother's delusions, she didn't just save her bank account. She forced her brother to finally grow up. The story of Tiffany teaches us that predators thrive in the shadows of polite silence. If we are afraid to ask hard questions or demand transparency because we fear creating conflict, we invite exploitation. Trust your instincts when the math does not add up, because a red flag is a warning, not a challenge to be overcome with more money. If you have ever had to make the difficult choice between saving a family member and saving yourself, I want to hear your story in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more narratives about justice, resilience, and the power of the truth.